January 24, 1934 would be the last newspaper advertisement for Roy Davis. After this, things changed at a rapid pace. Dan Davis announced that he would be leaving indefinitely. Reverend T. Powell replaced Dan Davis as pastor at his church on Mechanic Street. Shortly after, Roy Davis's Pentecostal church burned, and the Prophet's Church was advertised on the corner of 8th and Penn Street, replacing Roy Davis's Pentecostal Baptist Church advertisements. I found it odd, after all of this, that the Prophet continued to speak highly of Davis for the rest of his life. I remembered a sermon in 1964 mentioning the fire that burnt down Davis's church. The Prophet said that he was Davis's assistant pastor at that time. If this was correct, it would mean that members of Branham's congregation, described by the newspapers, were also members of Roy E. Davis's church, and that the church was splitting due to growth. I found it even more odd that the Pentecostal Baptist Church was not listed again until December 1935. Reverend Joseph D. Freeman was listed as the pastor, not Davis. What happened to Roy E. Davis? Since Davis's trustees and elders were now part of the Prophet's Church, and the Prophet said that he was Davis's assistant pastor when the church burned, did this mean that the Billy Branham Pentecostal Tabernacle was actually Davis's church instead of the Prophet's? I was even more curious about the 1933 prophecies. If the Prophet was preaching for Davis as late as 1934, how did Davis influence the perception of these prophecies? It was time to dig even deeper into the building of the new church. I wanted to know why Reverend Roy E. Davis, his brothers, and his son, all ministers, suddenly left town. Most of all, I wanted to know why the Prophet changed the timeline to 1933. There was a very unexplainable transition that happened from 1935 to 1936, not 1933.